Golden Hour Part.3 Diary. I am alive. If anyone were to ask why, I honestly could not answer. For as long as I can remember, I have always been alive. I was not brought into existence by my own will. I had lived without thought until one day I suddenly became aware of the fact that I had been born. But then, where did I come from? Who am I? What am I? Only I existed in my world, so there was no way for me to know what I was. I have nothing to look at as a comparison. This world consists of only the world itself and me. Who am I? I shouted out to the world, hoping the world might answer me. Who am I? The world echoed back the same question. It sounded just like my own voice. So, you don't know who you are either? I asked the world again, and once again it responded the same. So, you don't know who you are either? I tried asking other questions as well, but each time the world only echoed my words in a voice much like my own. I would learn nothing from talking to the world, so I stopped asking questions and began to think for myself. What am I? Why was I born? Why do I exist? Why I... At some point, I stopped thinking, because I couldn't come to any answers on my own, and the world wouldn't give me one either. I floated aimlessly in the world, existing without a thought. That day was no different. It was a day of simply existing, until, all at once, the liquid surrounding me began to heat up intensely. At last, the world was changing. I floated, still hoping the world might finally give me an answer. Then, without warning, an unending light appeared and I was swept away by it, once again, not by my own will. When I finally came to my senses, I had a body. I felt joy. It was pure joy. For the first time since my birth, I experienced the emotion of joy. I felt like I could do anything. It was a peaceful morning. Technically, it was already past noon, too late to call it morning by most standards. But for Wooyoung, who'd only gone to bed at 8 a.m., it was. He was in such a good mood, it almost made him wonder if he'd ever greeted a morning feeling this refreshed. He got out of bed and headed to the bathroom. As he squeezed toothpaste onto his toothbrush and began brushing his teeth, he hummed a tune absent-mindedly. Looking into the mirror, he felt an unexpected sense of warmth. "Hi, Jung Wooyoung." He examined his face from every angle, as if seeing it anew. "You know, I'd say I've got a pretty good-looking face," he muttered softly, then burst into laughter at the pleasant embarrassment. After finishing his shower, he changed into a breezy outfit and stepped outside. Wooyoung had made plans with Son to attend Hongjung's book signing event together. Just before dawn that day, just as he finally arrived home after managing to catch the first train out, a series of texts flooded in from the other members. The wording varied, but the message was the same. They all agreed with Wooyoung. "I've always related to how you felt. I kept thinking we should come back together as a group, too. Let's try this, Hyung." Honestly, I was a little scared, but after what you said last night, I realized, there's nothing we can't do. I'm in. I woke up this morning feeling like we could do anything. I guess I was just tired last night and got a little grumpy. Let's give it a shot. Let's see it through this time, as far as we can go. I'm always on your side, Jung Wooyoung. You know that, right? I'm with you. I guess we were all a little afraid, since we'd gone too far down our own paths, but somehow, I'm sure now, we can really make it this time. Let's make it happen, Wooyoung. I think I said too much. I don't even know why I did that. After sleeping on it, I couldn't help but think, was there really anything more important than our dream? Anyway, I want to be a part of this too. It was for real, Wooyoung thought as he received the members' texts. He felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, realizing that the earnest hope he had placed in Sopro, despite his doubts, had really come true. For now, it might just be a spark Sopro ignited, but if they really made it this time, Wooyoung had no doubt the members would be happy too. The night before, Sopro had emitted a fierce light. It had traveled through Wooyoung's mouth into his body, then vanished completely. Until now, he had been skeptical about whether Sopro had worked properly, but seeing the results now, he was sure. After meeting Hongjung at the signing event with Son, the other members were about to join them to discuss their plans for the road ahead, so Wooyoung hurried over. The weather was as bright as his mood. This time, it truly felt like nothing could stop them. Wooyoung was sure of it. Things were already looking up. Some members had become famous in their fields. One could produce music, and another had the means to fund it. It was no longer like those earlier days when all they did, and all they could do, was work hard in vain. "Oh no!" A reader receiving an autograph from Hongjung accidentally spilled their tomato juice. It would have been fine if it had just landed on the book he was signing, but instead, the juice splashed upward, drenching Hongjung's head. Woo-young, who had been about to greet Hongjung excitedly, ended up being taken aback. Haha, it's fine. If anything, I think it snapped me out of my food coma. Hongjung smiled warmly, reassuring the reader who had spilled the drink. Same as ever. I doubt he even knows how to get mad, thought Woo-young. Hongjung had always been like that. He instinctively put others' feelings before his own. Whenever Woo-young had to deal with a difficult passenger, he'd think of Hongjung, someone born for this kind of work. Had the same thing happened to Woo-young, though he might be able to say, "It's fine," he doubted he could have kept the discomfort from his face. Regardless of how gracefully Hongjung handled it, there was no excuse for the person who spilled the juice not to feel sorry. Woo-young frowned on Hongjung's behalf and shot the person a sharp look, waiting for an apology. It's like you got to experience Spain's Tomato Festival right here in Korea. Isn't it great? Huh? What kind of nonsense was that? That was definitely not the kind of attitude you'd expect from someone who should be apologizing. Woo-young stared in disbelief. He couldn't hold it in any longer. Hey, jokes are fine and all, but don't you think you should apologize for... Woo-young was cut off. Because, all at once, the room burst into laughter. People glanced at one another, grinning. Woo-young! Woo-young, still not understanding why everyone was laughing, felt relieved to see San. It almost felt like the whole room was in on something he wasn't, a joke he'd been left out of. He turned to San, hoping to let out his frustration, but even San was laughing as he looked at him. Why are you laughing? Why? Obviously because I'm happy. When Woo-young asked what exactly he was so happy about, San simply replied, Nothing. Do I need a reason? The sound of laughter filled the bookstore. One of the readers waiting in line for an autograph suddenly flung their drink just like the person who had spilled their juice earlier. Both the one who threw the drink and the one who got hit burst into laughter as they looked at each other. At this, others began to copy them. Both Hongjung and San laughed as they watched the chaos unfold. Then, someone ripped a page out of their book and stuffed it into their mouth, chewing. The room burst into laughter at the sight. Soon, more people started doing the same. They were like children. Hongjung reached for the book in front of him and tore out a page, but just before he could put it in his mouth, Woo-young snatched it out of his hand. Hyung, what the heck are you doing? Pull yourself together! Isn't this hilarious, Woo-young? Isn't this hilarious? Woo-young couldn't wrap his head around what Hongjung meant. But for some reason, Woo-young was laughing too. Woo-young's reflection in the glass was laughing. What Woo-young thought and what he actually felt were completely different. The sense of disassociation made him nauseous, and the nausea made him sick. As dry heaves overtook him, Woo-young decided to head for the bathroom and turned away. Just then, as the sixth wave of nausea hit him, a bright, ruby-red light suddenly poured from his mouth. Unsure of what he had just thrown up, Woo-young stood frozen, staring at the ruby light floating in the air before him. It was Sopro. It hovered before Woo-young for a short moment before whizzing around him a couple of times as if to say, "It's nice to meet you," and then flew straight into San's open, laughing mouth. The people around them watching began to laugh even louder at the sight. The laughter was unending. Woo-young, wanting to check if he was still laughing himself, touched his face with his hands. It was a face devoid of laughter, yet he did not know if this was a good thing or not. In the middle of the laughing crowd, Woo-young stood alone with a grave look on his face. The group had made plans to meet Sunghwa at the nearby fire department after the book signing, but Hongjung and San were laughing so hard they could barely walk, and it took them an entire hour to make it a mere 600 meters. They laughed at the bright sunlight, at the birds chirping, and at the deep green color of the leaves. Had it been just Hongjung and San laughing, things might not have been so difficult, but each and every person they passed erupted into laughter as well. People out walking would break into grins at the sight of each other. They high-fived and laughed together like old friends with everyone they met. Struggling to keep things under control, Woo-young dragged Hongjung and San along until they finally reached the fire department where Sunghwa was on duty. Yet Sunghwa was nowhere to be found. Sunghwa's boss, the fire chief, whose daughter happened to be a big fan of Mingy, greeted them instead. Unsurprisingly, the chief was also laughing, and his usual laugh cracked Hongjung and San up to the point that it literally had them on the floor. Woo-young was exhausted and, now resigned to the fact that Hongjung and San were still laughing, turned to the chuckling fire chief. He asked about the whereabouts of Sunghwa. Woo-young was told that a major fire had broken out at the printing factory, and Sunghwa had been dispatched there. When asked if they would wait for Sunghwa at the fire department, Woo-young responded by asking if the printing factory was far away. Hearing that it was only a 15-minute walk, Woo-young decided to head there. It seemed that the fire chief, and all the other firefighters at the station, were too busy laughing. At that moment, Woo-young wanted nothing more than to find someone who felt the same as he did. He had a faint hope that Sunghwa of all people wouldn't let himself get caught up in this strange phenomenon. After all, he had never seen Sunghwa laugh hysterically before.
Yeah.
The fire's being extinguished. It's going out! Woo-young's hope vanished along with the rapidly fading fire. While it was great that they had the fire under control, the sight of firefighters laughing uncontrollably at the charred remains of the building, its framework exposed, was unsettling. Even the person who seemed to be the owner of the printing factory stood behind the firefighters, laughing as well. Woo-young's head throbbed. As much as he tried, he couldn't think of a way out of this odd situation. He was starting to feel like he was the weird one for acting so serious despite everyone else's joy and laughter. Frustrated, Woo-young shoved his hands in his pockets and stepped back. He was beginning to feel like he would rather give up and just be an onlooker than try to be a hero. He wanted to run away, but knew that he couldn't. He couldn't ignore the fact that everything happening was somehow linked to him. Sopro. He should have never placed his hopes on that damn Sopro. Just then, something caught in his hand. Woo-young pulled it from his pocket. It was a crumpled piece of paper. When he unfolded it, he realized it was a page from the book Hongjung had torn earlier. In other words, it was a page from their time in World Z, containing Z's brainwashing speech made to control people's emotions. As he read it, Woo-young felt a strange sense of irony. How odd, he thought, to find himself relating, even just a little, to the words of Z. A small error is a crack, and cracks lead to pain. Pain. Pain is an unnecessary emotion and a negative element in life. We want to protect you all. In the face of the paradoxical situation he was currently trapped in, Woo-young was stunned. Without thinking, he began to read Z's words out loud. That was when, though it lasted only for a brief moment, Hongjung, San, and Sunghwa stopped laughing. The laughter quickly resumed, but Woo-young was sure that it marked a meaningful shift. Ever since the laughter began in the bookstore, it hadn't stopped. Not at the fire department, not even after arriving at the printing factory. Not until now. Wanting to confirm whether it had all just been in his head, Woo-young continued reading Z's speech. A world without cracks is always beautiful. You, living your life in your position, are the world itself. It wasn't just his imagination. As Woo-young read Z's speech aloud, the three stopped laughing and clutched their heads, as if struck by a wave of pain. San even began to gag. It was working! Don't doubt yourselves. You're always right. He recited the words, "Don't doubt yourselves," over and over, and Hongjung, San, and Sunghwa began to show signs of confusion. San kept gagging until Sopro was finally ejected from his body. At the same time, Hongjung and Sunghwa screamed in agony from the intense headaches. Sopro, still floating in the air, flew rapidly around them as if it were scanning everything around it. Like a bee, it buzzed past the burnt factory, the bright red fire truck, the blue sky, and the lush trees. Taking in a deep breath, Hongjung, San, and Sunghwa looked around like they had just woken up from a deep sleep. They were no longer smiling. Finally! Woo-young! As the three spotted Woo-young and headed toward him, Woo-young suddenly jumped up and yelled out in alarm. Don't laugh! I swear, if any of you laugh one more time! Woo-young spoke with a stern look on his face. It was the look of a policeman shouting, "Put down your weapons and step back. If you don't, I'll shoot." Pfft! The absurdity of it made the three of them laugh, despite themselves. Thinking he had failed, Woo-young slumped down in despair. It's not what you think. It's just the way you said, "Don't laugh," with such a serious look on your face. Seriously, how much trouble did we put you through with our laughing? Only then did Woo-young finally look up and examine the members' faces. While they were smiling, they weren't laughing hysterically like they had been before. Woo-young studied the crumpled paper in his hand. As soon as he felt the relief of having the members back to their usual selves, a question arose in his mind. Since Sopro was an item from World Z, he wondered if it might be reacting to Z's words. Does this mean that Z saved us? When you were reading that, flashes of the events we experienced in World Z began appearing in my head. It was as if my mind were a giant popcorn machine and our memories were the popcorn bursting inside. It's not so much that Z saved us, but that Z's speech brought back memories of our time there. It caused this burning pain in my head, but then, all of a sudden, my mind cleared. While there was no way to know for certain, they were sure Sunghwa's theory was likely to be right. All the people around them, everyone except the members, were still laughing uncontrollably. Only the members who knew of World Z could recall those memories. The others didn't even know what World Z was, so how were they supposed to help them? By the way, what caused all this in the first place? Just as Woo-young was hesitating, trying to find the right words to answer San's question, Sopro, which had been buzzing around like a bee, chose its next target. While the members kept their eyes fixed on Wooyoung as he nervously bit his lip, Sopro slipped unnoticed into the mouth of the printing factory owner. The man, who had been laughing hysterically as he watched his life's work go up in flames, swallowed Sopro and instantly stopped laughing. The world I had existed in up until then was small, and for the longest time, that world was my only conversation partner, my entire universe, everything that existed apart from me. Yet now that I've stepped out of that tiny universe, it means nothing more to me than the place where I used to be. Just like a bird turns its back on the hard shell it once called home after emerging into the greater world, so do I. They say that when a baby bird does not know how to break out of its shell, the mother bird will gently make the first crack with her beak. Maybe the one who made the first crack in my world lent me a bit of their strength after seeing how long I had remained trapped there, just like a mother bird. They showed me the real world, and what a great, wide world it is. I was so happy. It felt like my chest might burst, and laughter just spilled out of me. People called this feeling, this sense of saying yes to everything, joy. Some called it delight, or amusement, or excitement. Joy, joy, joy. The word sounded so pretty I couldn't help but say it over and over. Everything felt new, the water splashing into the air, the sunlight sparkling all around, even the simple act of breathing in and out. The crinkle of smiles at the corners of people's eyes, the trees swaying as if waving back. It was all so strange, so beautiful, so exciting, so delightful, so funny, so full of joy. How had I gone my whole life without noticing any of it? Had I been too excited? My mother bird spat me out so quickly, but I wanted to feel this emotion just a little longer. As I was savoring the feeling of joy through the second person's body, I was suddenly hit by something complex and disorienting. It was too tangled to call joy. It was as though a rainbow of colors were being painted atop of me. It was odd, and so, this time, I chose to leave the host of my own accord. I looked at the world as myself. Though it was just as beautiful as before, I did not feel the intense joy that I had felt when I had a body. I could not touch anything, but I wanted to feel more. To do that, I needed a body. It was then that I noticed him, a person who looked just like an empty shell. He wasn't far from the first two hosts I had entered. The man was sitting on the ground, laughing at the sight of a burnt building. And so I dove toward him. Splash! The sensation was akin to diving into a deep, dark sea. I lost all sense of direction, unsure of which way was up or down. I wanted to escape, and so I kept swimming. After a while, I began to wonder whether I was swimming toward something, or simply sinking. Wooyoung's ears turned red. He had been so sure in his decision to use Sopro at the time, but now, trying to explain it under the bright midday sun, he couldn't help feeling embarrassed. That said, it wasn't something he could hide. All the strange events that had happened so far were clearly connected to Sopro. Recounting the events of last night back to the members, he was reminded of Yosong's words. "Grow up. How long do you plan on acting so recklessly?" Part of him felt so wronged. Is it really so reckless to still be chasing a dream? Is it such a childish thing to do? Embarrassment and frustration fought inside him, and, for a moment, he felt as if he might cry. But he didn't. His ears just burned a deeper shade of red instead. "So you think it synchronized our emotions? That sounds half right, but also half wrong. Sopro didn't come inside me, so I don't really know much about that. What I felt was more like this overwhelming surge of happiness and joy. I guess you could say it was kind of like being a little drunk, sort of like when you're already in a good mood and the alcohol just makes you even more giddy." "Yeah, exactly. But unlike alcohol, it didn't mess with my memory or anything. It was just the emotion, vivid and clear, like it was all I could feel." Wooyoung had expected the members to scold, if not blame him for what had happened, but, to his surprise, they focused only on analyzing the situation with Sopro instead. This made Wooyoung more nervous, if anything. If he was going to be slapped and told off for this, he wanted to get it over with quickly. "Sorry, it's my fault you all got dragged into this mess." Seeing how visibly deflated Wooyoung looked, the members began confessing their own wrongdoings one by one, looking as though they had no other choice. "You know, 3 years ago, when we were all starting to get busy on our own and drift apart, I thought about using Sopro myself. I even went to see Yosong about it, but ended up turning back empty-handed. Back when I first started setting up my food truck, I needed money, so I went to ask Yosong for help. That day, I saw Sopro at his house and also thought for a second that maybe I should use it to bring us back together. But honestly, I was too afraid to even touch Sopro, so I never did. I think it was sometime around the start of this year. I was drinking with Yosong and he pulled out Sopro. He said he still feels guilty whenever he thinks about how his father's opposition split us apart. Now that he's strong enough to protect us, he wondered if we could come together through Sopro, at least in spirit. Wooyoung had been sure that Yosong thought that any dream of being together was futile. He had no clue that they had really been thinking the same thing until recently. But looking back on it, he remembered how Yosong had been the one to sacrifice himself and break the chromer for the sake of the members. He had always valued and believed in their dream. Using the buzz as an excuse, we were actually planning to activate Sopro. I also really missed our time together a lot, but then, suddenly, Yosong said something. Hey Hyung, what if what the guys are doing right now becomes their dream? Sunghwa recalled how Yosong's words snapped him back to his senses. Lost in the past, he had momentarily forgotten about his dream of becoming a firefighter. Sunghwa liked his job as a firefighter. While it may not have been his original dream, that didn't mean it lacked any meaning to him. What if, and these are all just what ifs, what if the guys have found new dreams? If we were to use Sopro now and go back to how things were in the past, wouldn't that mean I'd be robbing the members of their dreams again? Your first love isn't your only love, and that's why, in the end, we put Sopro back in its place. Though the red hue in his ears had faded, Wooyoung felt even more embarrassed than before. He realized that Yosong was definitely so much more mature than himself. Even the fact that he had felt resentful for a brief moment made him feel ashamed now. I had no idea that Yosong felt the same way I did, and that, like an adult, he chose to maturely accept things after thinking everything over. As Wooyoung hung his head, San put an arm around one of his shoulders. Sunghwa also stepped closer and placed an arm around his other shoulder. Hongjung took a step forward and spoke. We're not saying all this to make you feel bad. What I wanted to say is that we all wanted to use Sopro too. There's no need to blame yourself. Hongjung gently tousled Wooyoung's hair. How could Wooyoung not love these kind-hearted, understanding friends of his? It made him realize once again that, while he did want to make music and perform and dance on stage, the most important part of that dream was being together with the other members that he loved so dearly. Looking at the 3 pairs of feet gathered around him in a circle, Wooyoung clenched his fists. This was no time to wallow in self-pity. He was the one who awakened Sopro, and it was up to him to find a way out of this. Left Eye said that according to legend, Sopro was made by collecting the breath of Halazia. It probably reacted to our memories of World Z since it's from there. The members nodded in agreement with Wooyoung's theory. It was true that the memories of World Z had effectively woken San, Hongjung, and Sunghwa up, but it was unclear whether Sopro had reacted because of that. If it was Sopro that responded to those memories, shouldn't that mean that everyone, not just us, should have woken up as well? Wait, everyone stopped laughing. At San's words, the 4 of them turned and looked around. The people who had been laughing ceaselessly until just a moment before had stopped. Yet the members weren't sure if it was because the emotional resonance ended when San spat Sopro out, or because Sopro had disappeared entirely. All while they were still trying to make sense of what had happened, a fire hose suddenly fell to the ground with a thud. The firefighter, who was wrapping up, let go of the fire hose and slumped to the floor with a heavy sigh. He groaned, and soon after he burst into tears. His crying grew louder and louder until it was a sorrowful, heavy sob. It sounded both deeply painful and sad. The sound of crying erupted all around them like a water dam breaking into a flood. The whole city, its shops, apartments, house-lined streets, and public squares, filled with sadness. The members, who had been making their way out of the alley and looking around the main street, seemed momentarily overwhelmed by the grief and paused for a moment, holding their breath. I don't see the printing factory owner. Wooyoung, still standing before the burnt building, called out to the others. Only then did it hit them that Sopro, after disappearing, must have gone into the printing factory owner's body. The source of the sadness had to be the printing factory owner, whose lifelong savings and hard work had gone into creating that shop, only to have it consumed by flames in an instant. We need to find him. Sopro's inside of him now. The members began running around in search of him, sure that, immobilized by sadness, he couldn't have gone far. Laughter had disappeared from the streets that, just moments ago, had been filled with people doubled over in joy. Now, some slumped to the ground, pounding it as they sobbed, while others lay motionless, crying quietly. A few stood still, their faces buried in their hands, sobbing softly. It had been hard enough dealing with the hysterical laughter, but this, now, the way people wordlessly cried like wild animals, was much worse. Walking down a street filled with nothing but wails felt like walking through hell. It was as if the whole city was one big funeral. The members waded through that hell, looking for the factory owner with no clue as to where he might be as he drowned in his despair. San stretched out his arm and pointed. There, on the other side of a glass window, stood Yosong, quietly weeping. "Look, over there. Isn't that Yosong?" He must have been on his way to Jongho's studio. From the look of it, he was heading for Jongho's recording studio when he was hit with the resonating sadness. Yosong forgot where he was heading and stood frozen in place and lost in despair. The image of Yosong standing there on the other side of that glass window reminded them of how he had looked trapped by the Guardians and desolate of hope. It seemed as though, while Yosong's body was here in World A, his mind was still stuck in that moment, in that place in World Z. Tears flowed from his empty eyes. Yosong. At the sound of his name being called, Yosong lifelessly turned to look at Wooyoung standing outside the window. Seeing the deep, dark despair clouding Yosong's eyes, Wooyoung felt his breath catch in his throat. Back then, after the others had finally made their way back to World Z and saved Yosong, it was as though he'd lost his voice. As though he were someone who had lost all feeling, devoid of emotion and showing no reaction even to the members' words. It wasn't until much later that Yosong began to open up about that time. "I thought there was no way out. At first, I tried to find ways to survive, to escape, but before long, I realized there was no way. I don't know if the Guardians stole my emotions from me, or—" Yosong swallowed his words and left the thought unfinished, but the members knew what he meant to say. Though they wanted to fully understand what Yosong had gone through during his time trapped alone there, they also knew that there are times when effort alone is not enough. The most they could do for him was to hold his frozen hands and hope that the warmth might reach his heart. No words felt right. No words were enough. As if he understood everything without needing it to be said, Yosong simply smiled, bright and gentle, and continued. "Still, I like who I am more now, after having gone through all of that. I used to think that there was no way out, but it turns out that was just something I decided when I was lost in despair. There's a huge difference between living with that understanding and living without it, don't you think?" After going through all of that, Yosong would sometimes joke that he was, by far, now the most mature of them all. If anything, they should all be calling him Hyung. And so, the members believed that Yosong had overcome his pain and that they understood, at least to some extent, the pain that he had endured. But that was all only an illusion. In Yosong's dark, tear-filled eyes, the wounds left by despair and fear were still there, raw and unhealed. Someone once said that even a speck of one's pain feels heavier than the vast pain of others, that it's the same for everyone. And now, Wooyoung felt like he finally understood what that meant. The pain he had thought was unbearably heavy was, in truth, so small compared to what Yosong had endured, or was perhaps still enduring. Pushing aside the thought that they needed to look for the factory owner, Wooyoung rushed to pull open the glass door. He couldn't bear to see Yosong trapped anywhere any longer. Wooyoung held Yosong's hand. It was cold, just as it had been that time. He prayed that the warmth of his hand might reach him. "I finally understand your dream now, Yosong. You wanted to be free. From the cage your father put you in, from the Guardian's glass room. And you are, Yosong. You made it. You built a world of your own, and you found the strength now to protect both yourself and everything you hold dear. You're amazing, you know that? Truly incredible." Wooyoung spoke with his heart as he clutched Yosong's hand and looked into his dark eyes, praying that his feelings would somehow reach him. And at that moment, he saw it. A small flame flicker to life in Yosong's once lightless eyes. "Let's head to Jongho's recording studio first." While his face remained sad, the tears that had flowed down Yosong's face had stopped. Wooyoung, pulling Yosong along by the hand, followed Hongjung, Sunghwa, and San into Jongho's studio. "Oh, you guys made it." They opened the door to Jongho's studio, worried that they would find him crying as well, but to their surprise, he greeted them with a calm expression, perfectly fine. Was his mindset so strong that not even Sopro could affect him? Despite his cute appearance, Jongho could be almost frighteningly incredible. "I just got lucky. I was listening to ATEEZ's music when it all happened." Late last night, after texting Wooyoung that he had agreed with him, Jongho went straight to the recording studio. The members had promised to meet there and discuss what kind of music they would create together from now on, and he didn't want to wait a second longer. At first, Jongho had also been under Sopro's influence and, laughing, excitedly played ATEEZ's music from a performance of theirs in World Z. Upon hearing the song, his head was struck by an immense pain, and he came to his senses immediately. The youngest's luck was truly amazing. "Yosong hasn't woken up yet, right? Hold on." Hearing from the other members what had happened, and seeing Yosong drowning in sorrow, he decided to use the same method that had worked for him. Like a doctor diagnosing and treating a sick patient, Jongho calmly played ATEEZ's music for Yosong. For a moment, Yosong held his head in pain, just like the other members had, before life returned to his eyes as he regained consciousness. Woo-young pulled Yo-sung in for a tight hug, sorry that he had misunderstood and resented him for so long. Though a bit awkward, but not unpleasant for him, Yo-sung gently patted Woo-young's back a few times before quietly asking, "So, what exactly is going on?" Woo-young let out a long sigh. Sunghwa, Hongjung, and Son looked at Woo-young and quietly laughed. "Just how many times am I going to have to atone for my mistakes today? Can we maybe find Mingi and Yuno first before I explain myself again?" Yo-sung, who was staring at Woo-young with a straight face, sighed and responded, "Jung Woo-young, I knew this would happen. You touched Sopro, didn't you?" "Damn you, Kang Yo-sung," Woo-young thought. "Taking coffee orders. Anyone who doesn't respond in 5 minutes is getting an iced coffee. Lol, Sung Mingi, look behind you. Met up with Yuno at the cafe. We'll head over together." Those were the last messages Yuno and Mingi left in their group chat. It was clear that the two of them were together and at a cafe somewhere nearby. Jongho copied ATEEZ's music onto his phone so that it would be ready to play to the crying members once they found them. But first, the group put their heads together and tried to sort out what they knew about Sopro. At first, it was like Woo-young said. I felt like my emotions were resonating with something. But it was different after Sopro went inside me. Son, after hearing Woo-young recall his experience absorbing Sopro, explained that his encounter was a little different. After Woo-young first held Sopro in his hand and prayed that the members would all feel the same emotions as he did, he felt a sense of relief. It was the kind of relief you feel after sharing your true hopes and desires. It felt so natural that Woo-young was not aware at all that Sopro had gone inside of him. The only unusual thing he noticed was the bright, ruby-red light. Then, when the members texted him saying they all wanted to try out being a group again, all he felt was pure joy and elation. And just as he had hoped, the other members had felt the same way, like they could do anything, fueled by an overwhelming sense of excitement and joy. But it was different when Sopro moved to Son. How should I put this? It didn't feel like all my emotions were being amplified, but that one specific emotion within me was heightened more than anything else, like someone was forcing me to throw away every emotion except for joy. It was as if the only emotion that had ever existed was joy, as if every other emotion had never existed at all. Son recalled how he felt as though he could only feel happiness, and how, at the time, it felt natural. But, as soon as Sopro left his body, the other emotions that had been suppressed hit him like a wave, and he became aware that something had been manipulating him. So what Left Eye told us about Sopro was wrong? Maybe it's not the emotions of the person using Sopro that are synchronized with others, but the emotions that Sopro chooses to feel instead. But that wasn't what Woo-young experienced. When it was inside Woo-young, we were sharing his feelings. While Sopro went inside both of them, what Woo-young and Son had experienced was clearly different. What caused that difference? The members were deep in thought. It was such a chaotic moment, and everything happened so quickly, so I'm not sure, but... Woo-young hesitated, and the others waited in anticipation of what he would say next. When Sopro left Son, it looked a little bigger, at least compared to when it left me. Woo-young spoke with uncertainty, unsure and suggesting that he might have been mistaken. Meanwhile, Hongjung, who had been leaning against the wall listening to the other members talk about their experiences, seemed to gain some certainty after hearing Woo-young's words of observation. Could it be that Sopro is getting stronger? The only difference between Woo-young and Son's experience was the order. Woo-young was first, and Son was second. The other members looked at Hongjung with expressions that clearly said they didn't understand what he meant. Hongjung, pushing himself off the wall and taking a step closer to the members, continued. Try to remember what Left Eye said. According to the legends of World Z, Sopro is a magical spirit born out of the breath of Holozia. It's not a magic stone, battery, or anything like that. It's a spirit. Do you understand what this means? It's not an object, but a spirit. What does that even mean? The members pondered the meaning of Hongjung's words. After a moment, they all answered in unison. It has a will of its own? It seems like the most plausible theory for now. If Sopro is a spirit with a will, then everything that happened makes sense. When the spirit first awoke, it was weak, and by the time it moved to me, it was a little stronger. What about when it switched from joy to sadness? That's probably because Sopro is now residing inside the printing factory owner's body. Having just lost his life's fortune in a fire, the man was probably overwhelmingly sad. Why was Sopro resonating with that emotion, instead of forcing him to feel joy like it had done to Son earlier? Could it be learning different emotions? The other member's eyes widened at Sunghwa's words. If, as Sunghwa said, Sopro is experiencing and learning emotions, that would explain their current situation. To sum everything up, Sopro is a spirit with will, and it needs a vessel to contain it, like a body. And each time it moves bodies, it gets stronger. While doing so, it learns the main emotion each vessel is feeling in that moment. It can also force or impose any emotions it wants to feel onto its shell. In other words, Sopro is growing. At Wooyoung's words, everyone looked at each other with their mouths agape. In such a short period of time, it had already made its way through 3 bodies, and its power had grown to the point that it could force people around it to instantly synchronize with a particular emotion. Like Wooyoung said, Sopro was growing, and it was growing fast. Something's happening. They all turned their heads toward Jongho. Without any further explanation, he held out his phone. The screen was open to Jongho's social media feed, and they could see people's posts were disappearing in real time. Jongho looked up Mingy's account. It read, "No posts." Mingy, an influencer with over 10 million followers, now had an empty account. They kept refreshing the page in disbelief. Then Mingy's account disappeared. "We need to find Mingy and Yuno,"